one of the world's most formidable weapons.
Now, 1 people into launch.
Built only by Bharat. BrahMos set to spread wings wider. BrahMos missiles to be exported to Indonesia. Big buzz over $450 million defense deal. India grows in global defense market.
Welcome to a special episode of BattleCry. We've got an exclusive scoop here on India today on one of the biggest ever Indian weapons exports. It's a big story that I'm going to detail for you right here. Thanks as always for being with me. One of India's most formidable weapons, the made-in-India BrahMos supersonic cruise missile that already happens to be operational with the Indian Armed Forces, is all set to be part of the biggest ever Indian export contract. A $450 million export deal of BrahMos missiles is about to be signed between India and Indonesia. Very, very significant export deal just 2 years after India debuted the BrahMos export with Philippines. It's a big, big message to you-know-who. Take a look. One of the world's most formidable weapons, the made-in-India BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. Developed with Indo-Russian tech, but built only in Bharat. The BrahMos is already fully operational with India's three armed forces. From the Navy, to the Army, to the Air Force. And now, the BrahMos is all set to spread its wings even wider. 2 years after India exported the BrahMos for the first time to the Philippines, India is on the verge of finalizing an even bigger BrahMos missile export deal, this time with Indonesia. Sources reveal that Indonesia's defense ministry is negotiating a $450 million deal to give its military BrahMos muscle. Buzz over the upcoming deal comes right before the Indonesian president arrives in India as chief guest for the Republic Day celebrations this month. According to highly placed sources, India is offering Indonesia a loan through the State Bank of India to fund the multi-million-dollar deal. The potential deal marks a continuation of India's push to establish itself as a major player in the global defense export market, a flagship effort under the Modi government's Atmanirbharta push. Indonesia's interest in the BrahMos missile system aligns with its growing defense modernization efforts and regional security considerations, especially in view of an increasingly aggressive China and maritime disputes with countries in that region. As a nation with vast territorial waters and strategic choke points like the Malacca Strait, Indonesia could use the BrahMos to bolster its deterrence posture against maritime incursions and protect critical sea lanes of communication. The BrahMos missile's speed, precision and versatility make it ideal for neutralizing surface threats, including hostile naval vessels or incoming aggressors in contested waters. Additionally, deploying the BrahMos system would demonstrate Indonesia's hard stance on regional disputes, particularly in the South China Sea.
It will definitely bolster the modernization of defense forces of Indonesia. It will strengthen their defenses. It will strengthen their coastal defenses. And best thing about BrahMos is that it can be fired from land, air and sea.
If announced during the Indonesian president's visit this month, the deal would underscore the deepening bilateral relations between the two nations and India's commitment to expanding its footprint in the global defense market. This would also reinforce India's position as a reliable partner for defense tech and exports, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. Other countries known to be at various stages of discussion with India to procure the BrahMos missile include Vietnam, Brazil and Malaysia.
And after Philippines, Indonesia happens to be the second ASEAN country to which India will be selling BrahMos missiles. And this expanding realm of India's exports to these nations are truly in tune with its call to make for the world. This is Shivani Sharma with camera person Prem Chand for India Today from New Delhi.
So the BrahMos is a formidable weapon, and after Philippines, India is all set to sign a deal to supply it to Indonesia. That exclusive report was filed by India Today's defense correspondent Shivani Sharma, who joins me live. Shivani, no coincidence that the Indonesian president is going to be the chief guest at this year's Republic Day. Usually these deals do come up right around such high-profile diplomatic visits. How close are we to an announcement? Because these discussions have been going on for a while now.
Shiv, you are absolutely right in pointing out that this visit by the Indonesian president is also very important in terms of closing the discussions between India and Indonesia for these BrahMos missiles. And these discussions started on a similar visit in 2020, Shiv, when the Defense Minister of Indonesia had visited India and he held some discussions with Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. There were certain budgetary constraints then, but a solution has been found. And very soon what we are hearing from our sources is that not only discussions will be done, the final discussions that we may say, and also an announcement can come along with the visit of Indonesian president to India when he comes as a chief guest on the occasion of Republic Day.
Shivani, great report. Thanks very much for that input. I'm going to take it forward now and tell our viewers here on BattleCry what the BrahMos is. For those of you who may not be familiar, it's important that you know, so listen carefully. It's a supersonic cruise missile, the most formidable of its class. Very few countries have them. India builds these missiles. They're built only here in India. It is powered by a ramjet engine that allows it incredible speeds. It has an operational range formally of 290 kilometers, but it's actually much more than that. Can fly at an altitude of 15 kilometers, even though it is a cruise missile. It has a sea skimming variety, which can fly as low as 5 to 10 meters above the surface of the ocean. It has active radar homing. It's said to be, devastatingly accurate when it homes in on its targets. And as you just heard, one of our guests in that report say, the launch platforms can be anything from a warship to a land launcher, to a fighter aircraft, to a submarine. So these are very, very modular missiles that can be very flexibly deployed in different kinds of scenarios. Now, who all operate the BrahMos as of now? Well, obviously, the Indian military are the principal customers. The Indian Navy, the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force, in that order, have inducted the BrahMos in large numbers. So they are there with all three armed forces. The first export customer, foreign customer of the BrahMos was Philippines in a deal that was signed just a couple of years ago. The next customer, like we're breaking here on BattleCry, is all set to be Indonesia in a $450 million deal. But they're not the only ones. There are many other countries waiting in line to close some export deals for the BrahMos. These include Vietnam, Malaysia and Brazil. Now, if you want to zoom in just a little bit to Indonesia, which is set to sign this $450 million deal with India for the BrahMos missile, the obvious question is, why does Indonesia need the BrahMos? Very, very broadly, the country is an archipelagic country, many islands, huge maritime domain. It has maritime territorial disputes with China. It's had, conflagrations and disputes and fights that have taken place as recently as 2022 with China. The defense of its vast exclusive economic zone in the ocean environment is of prime importance for a country like Indonesia. Strategic balance in Southeast Asia, keeping in view China's rise. Deterrence against emerging threats like fishing vessels and others also come into the picture. And it is a much needed set of teeth really, for its armed forces, which have been desperately in need of modernization. So there is a military aspect to it, there's a diplomatic aspect to it, and there most certainly is a geopolitical and geostrategic aspect to this deal. Joining me live now to understand this $450 million deal between India and Indonesia for the supply of BrahMos missiles, I'm joined now by our favorite regional observer, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. Captain D.K. Sharma is a senior voice with Bharat Shakti, is a consultant with them, and is also importantly a former spokesperson of the Indian Navy, and also Commodore Anil Jaisingh, who's a veteran submariner and Vice President of the Indian Maritime Foundation. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with me here today on BattleCry. Commodore Jaisingh, I'll kick it off with you. A deal for the supply of BrahMos missiles to Indonesia. Why is this important? Why does Indonesia need these missiles?
I think it's very, thank you for having me on your show, Shiv. I think it's a very, very important and a very, very positive development. From an Indian perspective, it's very important because it boosts our defense diplomacy.
Yeah.
It showcases our industrial capability, and it gives us a vantage position in the east of the Malacca Straits, where, to counter what is happening, what our neighbor is doing on the east of the Malacca Straits. So I think from all these three perspectives, it's very important, as you said, diplomacy, politically, geopolitically, geostrategically, extremely important from our perspective. But more importantly, I think from Indonesia's perspective, now Indonesia, as you mentioned, is a very strategically located country. It provides the gateway from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. All the three major choke points pass through Indonesian waters, whether it's the Malacca, Lombok, or the Sunda Straits. And China has been repeatedly, in its attempt to expand its footprint westwards, has been kind of troubling Indonesia. It's been encroaching on its EEZ. And Indonesia, being an archipelagic state, again, as you said, has a huge EEZ. I mean, it's very difficult for it to patrol its entire EEZ all the time.
Correct. Yeah.
When the previous president had come to power, he had talked about making Indonesia a global maritime fulcrum. However, Indonesia, because of its own internal challenges, fell far short of that. So perhaps this is now an attempt to quickly try and pick up the pace, because it's required as of yesterday. Indonesia needs to have a very powerful maritime capability, considering that it's a large maritime nation. And so it's important from that perspective.
Okay. So, Sushant, bringing you in to give us your perspective, your strategic perspective on this deal. Obviously, discussions have been on for a long time. Many other countries in that particular part of the world have been interested in the BrahMos system. But this is much more than just the weapon. How do you read this deal, Sushant?
Shiv, when you are exporting a weapon system like the BrahMos,
yes.
I think apart from the weapon system itself, you're making a very important diplomatic and strategic point. And that point, I think, will be well taken by many of the adversaries of India as well as Indonesia. At one level, what you're doing is that you've had, a reasonably good relation with Indonesia, but you've also had your tensions with them. But you are now upscaling your relationship with Indonesia. Because if you're going to be supplying this kind of a weapon system to them, then, it means that your relationship is reaching a level which it had not reached earlier. Number one. Number two, Indonesia has very serious challenges in the maritime domain vis-a-vis China.
Yes.
And if you're building up their muscle, then in a manner of speaking, you're also building up your own muscle, in that region. Because if you want to play the kind of role that India aspires to play, to secure our own interests, then we have to tie up with countries like Indonesia, Philippines also. There have been talks earlier with the Vietnamese. Perhaps we might be able to strike some deal with them.
Correct.
Malaysia as well. So I think what we are trying to now do is, in our own limited way, we are now starting to pull our own weight in this particular region. Now, whether you look at it in the context of Quad Plus, or you look at it in the context of India's strategic autonomy, whichever way you want to, cut this pie, the fact of the matter remains that you're joining this game. You're not holding back. You're not in a wait and watch mode. So you are now, making a pitch for playing this game the way this game needs to be played. Does this mean that we've done everything we need to do? Far from it. I think we are sitting on very valuable real estate, which we need to develop, and we should have developed it yesterday.
So true.
And I'm with the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I believe you went out there and had a good trip out there. I wish you had taken me with you, but I think that is the kind of real estate we really need to develop. We need to make it into a major military base. We also need to make it into a major economic base because it is located in a place where it can play both those roles. So I think this is a game. If we are upscaling, the level at which we are going to play this game, I think this is a very, very critical deal. Of course, what we are supplying to the Indonesians is right now not the full thing. It's basically based missiles which we are supplying to them right now, which is exactly what they need right now. So, and remember one thing, this missile is not purely Indian. This has a Russian component, a very critical Russian component. And if this missile deal goes through with Indonesia, then I think, there is a certain messaging on the Indo-Russian front. You can just now keep expanding this pie the way you want to expand it. But it's very clear that if Indonesia is buying this missile with Russian components, then it is also another level of diplomatic signaling which is also taking place.
Very, very important. So the messaging, apart from the weapon system itself, is just as important as the capability that the BrahMos brings to the Indonesian military once this deal is signed. To zoom back into the actual capability, Captain Sharma, in what ways would the Indonesian military actually use the BrahMos? What sort of threats would the BrahMos deter against if we have to zoom in, to the operational aspect of what they face?
Well, good evening, Shiv, and good evening to my fellow panelists. As has been brought out very clearly by both Sushant and Commodore AJ Singh, see the terrain, see the spread on which this missile is finally going to be exported by India. One end is Philippines. In the center, you have got Indonesia, and above on the arc, if you see, that is Vietnam. Now, if this missile batteries, now when you're saying that in what role will it be put? Philippines has taken coastal missile batteries, which means they will have a capability to keep the yellow or the Chinese threat at least 300 kilometers away. Number two, when all this coastal batteries start coming, and we're not restricting it to only coastal batteries, maybe tomorrow, day after, they will also like to have this missile as the missile of choice, like we have seen in the Indian Navy. Today, we have commissioned the biggest warships of Indian Navy. Both are, armed to the teeth.
With the BrahMos,
BrahMos is the primary part of the anti-shipping missile. It can also be fired on land from the sea. So see the capability, and very difficult to, bring this missile down when it is coming towards use. True. I have seen these firings. It is unimaginable kind of, parameters it has achieved, and that is why it is becoming one of the most preferred missiles. And see how Indian Navy has done it, and probably our neighbors are also watching that. Every ship, every platform is full of BrahMos. So the reliability of the missile, then ease of operating, then we are just next door. Anything happens, we just fly in, and within 4 or 5 hours you can go and sort out their issues. So all these things will strategically bring and this is a diplomatic win for us, for both the countries. Actually.
Very, very important. So we've established the role of the missile, the diplomatic and strategic messaging, the capability that it will give to the Indonesians. But Commodore Jaising, and this is my second round of questions to you all, starting with you, Commodore Jaising, which is that, something has fundamentally changed. I have been tracking the BrahMos program for about 20 years now. And I remember for the first 10 years, there has been a lot of reluctance and hesitation when it comes to thinking about exporting it. It's not like these countries have been suddenly expressing interest in it. Many of these countries have been wanting the BrahMos for many, many years. What has suddenly changed that India is now radiates the kind of confidence required to export such weapons? I remember that there have been bureaucratic and political reluctance to export such weapons.
Absolutely. But I think in the last decade or so, there's been an assertiveness in our foreign policy which we have never seen earlier. Look East became Act East. If it may be just a matter of semantics, but it meant something. And I think as far as defense exports goes, I think it's now become one of the major targets of the Ministry of Defense to achieve a certain amount of exports in a particular time frame. I think it's 5,000 crores, 25,000 crores by 2025 or something like that. I'm not sure of the figure. And this is going to be a big boost towards that. So now we are actually trying to say that we have arrived, we are an emerging big power, and we have to project power like a big power should. Why should we be hesitant? We've always been the nice guys. We are still the nice guys, but we're not going to allow ourselves to be bullied or allow our region or what is of our maritime interest or our strategic interest to be dominated by somebody else. And I think if we can't prevent those guys coming here, then we go there. So I think it's that. And more important, I think, is an aspect that even with Indonesia, I think this discussions on this have been going on for a while. And obviously, cost was a major consideration for Indonesia. Now, if India is taking that initiative, I understand they're going to extend a loan to Indonesia to be able to buy the missile. I think this is another breakthrough. If you remember, the Soviet Union was able to provide so much military ordnance to the developing world was only because they had what we used to call friendship prices. Friendship prices. China is doing exactly the same thing. So if we've got to be in the game, we've got to also adapt to these innovative means of enhancing our defense diplomacy. And this is one of the most effective ways of exercising military diplomacy, because one, it gives you a presence, and secondly, any military diplomacy also gives you a certain amount of leverage in the region.
True. Sushant, same question to you. What do you think has changed? Because it was not very long ago, even I remember that, I'm sure you do as well, when exporting such systems was considered almost unthinkable.
Yeah, Shiv, we seem to think that diplomacy is all about tying a chastity belt around ourselves and, behaving as though the world will operate on utterly moral principles, and we will be the past masters at giving moral lessons to everybody and preaching from a pulpit. Nobody wants it, okay? If you say I want to act east, if you say I am a net security provider, if you say I am going to play this game, I am going to protect my interests, then please show us what do you have in store to be able to do all this. If you are just going to give me, a statement or two in my support, you are worth nothing to nobody, right?
True.
So I think we have smelled the coffee and we have kind of given up that nonsensical past of ours where we were the most preachy nation in the world. And we've become a lot more realistic and we are playing this game the way this game is supposed to be played rather than, wanting to play some kind of a moral science game. So I think that is one major change. Does this mean that we are now becoming warmongers? Far from it. I think what we are trying to do is we are trying to secure our own interests, and we think that securing our own interests means that friendly countries in our neighborhood also need to be secured, and to the extent we can pitch in to provide them security, we will do it. Number one. Number two, on this whole defense industry business, I have still not understood the rationale for not allowing private sector to develop weaponry in India in the way it should be, right? But aside of that, if you are going to become a weapon supplier, an exporter of weapon systems, which is a very lucrative market, again, if you are into this moral science business, you will think it's very immoral to export weapons. I am not in that business. Now, if you are going to be in that business, you have to create a market for it, right? Now, to create a market for it, as the gentleman before me was saying, you have to give these prizes, you have to give these deals, you have to tie in other countries into a certain defense ecosystem with you. And that is what we are trying to do now.
Yes,
so the purists will argue that we are not earning anything out of it. If you are going to get into that, bean counting approach, then you are missing the wood for the trees, right? And I don't think we should be doing that. I think we are playing the game the way it should be played.
And it's really, really good to hear that. And, and a final question to Captain Sharma. Captain Sharma, this is also a victory in many ways for the Indian Navy itself. The Indian Navy is also involved in diplomacy. The Indian Navy, I know for a fact, has been trying to, push, BrahMos exports to some of these friendly countries. It has not been successful for so many years. But now Philippines, Indonesia is on the horizon. Vietnam could be next. So the Indian Navy has every reason to feel very proud.
Absolutely, Shiv. If you see, with all our eastern countries, littorals, we are doing exercises. Start from, Bangladesh, go to Indonesia,
Yeah.
Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines. Now, when we operate with each other, then we exchange the best practices. So they must have also seen and studied our weapon systems and what is best. And number two, our visits are so frequent in this part of the world that next thing is how to give it to them. When you're saying that we have been keeping away from giving it,
Yes.
now we have confidence on the weapon, we have our interest, we have a threat coming from Far East. So if all my inventory is also lined up over there, it can be used to our advantage, as Commodore JC was saying, that keep the threat as far as possible. Because this is going to be the battleground of future. There is no doubt about it.
It's
so
very,
now,
very,
whether they come from the Malaccas, they come from the Sunda Strait, or they come from the Lombok Strait, if we have all these things with our radars and the next step, eventually it will be the networking of things. So we will get to know the threat much, much, much more in advance. And there are other means and ways and means to do that. So why not? And you have about the first island chain theory, how they are moving out. Second island chain. So why not? Why not India? We have the wherewithal, we have the financial muscle now, and we are ready to extend the loans. So we will have all these things as deterrents.
It's really good to see. It's really good to see things, aligning themselves in the way that the Navy has planned, and with those expanded responsibilities. We saw the Prime Minister commissioning 3 warships. They cannot be inducted, faster than that. But this is a really good day for the Indian Navy and for the Indian strategic system. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on this important episode of BattleCry. The big deal with Indonesia for the supply of BrahMos missiles is on the table. It's on the horizon and should be concluded very, very soon.